there's obviously a lot going on in the world right now.
You think?
Yeah, yeah. Just would love to hear what Bashar, has said about what's going to happen over these next few months, because I'm sure a lot of people that are listening are a little fearful about these turbulent times.
Yeah, well, one of the things he said,
Hey, everybody. Our mission here at the Heart Coherence Collaborative is to get people in touch with the healing power of the heart.
And we really need your help. Right now, only 1% of viewers subscribe. We are aiming to take that number to 6%.
The reason why we want to do that is the more people that subscribe, the more people in the world can learn the magical practice of heart coherence.
So please help us out. If you ever listened, if you love this message, please just take a moment to subscribe.
Thank you so much.
We love you. So this is really exciting and big that you're here with us. So thank you for coming to the Heart Coherence Collaborative.
oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me and thank you for doing this.
So I would love to just hear a little bit about your journey and how you started life and how you ended up becoming a channel.
Okay, well, it all started in 1973 when I had two very close broad daylight UFO sightings here over LA. And after having seen something like that, I knew that the world was not what I thought it was, not what I had been told it was. So I started doing investigation, reading any books I could find on the subject. And sort of one thing led to another, because especially back then, there weren't, big, metaphysical sections or anything like that in the bookstore. It's like every single book on anything that had to do with what they used to call the occult was all on, one tiny shelf in the bookstore. So I just kind of like went down the line. It's like, okay, here's a book on psychic phenomena. Here's a book on ESP. Here's a book on UFOs. Here's a book on channeling. And I just started sort of jumping from one book to another to see what was going on. 10 years after the sighting, after I had read the Seth material, if you're familiar with that, from Jane Roberts, and became somewhat familiar with the idea of what channeling was, I was introduced to a channel who was conducting seminars at the time. And I went to the seminars, I went to the lectures to listen. And I thought, after a few months, this is really interesting information, and it seems to align with everything I've read, especially in the Seth material. But then the entity coming through that channel offered to teach a channeling class. Now, I just always thought, based on what had happened to Jane Roberts and people like Edgar Cayce, that channeling was just sort of something that happened to you automatically, that nobody seemed to know why it happened. So I was kind of surprised to hear that somebody could actually teach you to be a channel. So I went into the class not thinking I was going to become a channel. It was just part of my research to understand, how can you teach something like this to someone? So the class was about a 12-week course. It was a series of guided meditations. And it wasn't necessarily expected that you had to learn to channel an entity. It was about getting in touch with more creativity, with your higher self, with other aspects of your consciousness that you may be out of touch with, or making connections to spirit guides or what have you. So about halfway through the course, when the class was under a guided meditation being given by the entity, I just received what I can only describe as a telepathic hit. Like somebody just sort of shoved a DVD into my head and everything was there all of a sudden. I understood that the UFO had been shown to me on purpose by Bashar to get me to start doing the research I needed to do. I had a memory come back of having made an agreement before this life to do the channeling with him. I saw an image of his face. I understood who he was as an extraterrestrial being. And the message that was there was basically, it's time to begin this if you still want to do this. So it was offered as a choice. Now, all of this unfolded in my head in literally a split second. It was just all there. I hadn't said anything to anyone. I was just sitting in the class undergoing this meditation. So I thought, okay, am I having a hallucination? Is this a side effect of the meditation? What's going on? But the second that this was happening, the entity that was guiding the class in the meditation stopped talking and turned right to me and said, there is an entity here for you right now. if you're ready to begin. And I opened my eyes and I happened to glance behind me. One of my classmates had somehow picked up on the image of Bashar's face that I saw in my head, and she was actually sketching it on a piece of paper. So I said, okay, this is not just my imagination. I've got two outside validations that there's something happening here. So I decided, okay, let's see where this is going to go. So I began in the weeks that followed practicing letting this in. It was very tough to handle the energy at first. It took some time to get used to it, but I made enough progress that the teacher asked me to co-channel the next class with him. So I did that. And during that class, a woman came in who wanted to do a doctoral thesis paper on the connection between channeling and psychology. So she was looking for subjects to study. And I became one of her subjects. I think she had like 12 or 13 of us. And I would go to her house. She would invite her friends over. I would channel for them. She would take her notes so she could write her paper. Now, the first time we did that, there was maybe 5 friends. But then word started spreading, and the next week there were 10, and the next week there were 20, and the next week, so it just kind of kept building. People were sharing the recordings with each other. Then I started getting invitations to go to different cities and do this. We had to start doing it more than once a week to accommodate everyone. We had to start renting auditoriums. And then I started getting asked to go to different countries to do this and started traveling around. And here I am 40 years later, still doing this. And that, in a nutshell, is what happened.
Wow. So fascinating. I want to just, first of all, congratulate you on having that courage, during that time of your life where you had these, contacts where probably there wasn't much of that going on in the world. Like you probably didn't have too many friends that were just hanging out, having these contact experiences,
No, but see, that's the weird thing is by the time the channeling class started, I knew enough about what channeling was from reading the books that I was just more fascinated with the process and what it was capable of allowing someone to do. And it didn't really occur to me that there was something to be courageous about. I was just following my curiosity and my path. But the weird thing was, after I had been doing it, I don't know, for maybe a year or two, at the time I was working in special effects in the film industry, making miniatures and stuff like that for films. And because the class was going on and I was still a part of it, it had a regular schedule. So at a certain time, every like Thursday, I would leave work on a regular basis. And so one day, one of the coworkers went, why are you leaving on Thursday at the same time every time? Where are you going? Because it was an unusual kind of schedule. And I was going, okay, here we go. How do I break this as to where I'm going and what I'm doing? So I sort of haltingly kind of said, well, there's this class I'm going to, and it sort of puts you in touch with, your higher consciousness and allows you to sort of bring information through. And she said, oh, you're a channel. And I went, how do you know about that? Oh, my mother's been channeling for years. So it was just kind of like, okay, this is more common than I think. It's not something I have to be afraid of talking about if it seems appropriate to talk about it. So that just kind of let me know I could relax about that whole thing and just keep pursuing, my interests in that direction.
Yeah, the reason I brought that up is because I had a period in my life where I saw in a meditation, I had like a 5-dimensional pyramid with an eye on it come to me. And then like for the next few weeks, I was seeing pharaohs and all this stuff, but no one in my life was experiencing anything like that. So I felt like I was crazy. And I took a step away from it for a while,
Yeah. How long ago was that?
Probably 5 years.
Yeah.
6 years. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously now, it's a little more common. Of course, there are people that, still don't relate to it at all. But I don't care. This is what happened to me, and this is what I do. It's one of the things I do anyway. And no one has to believe that Bashar is real. I can't prove it to anyone. I have my own validations for it, especially with seeing the UFO and all that. But it doesn't really matter whether anyone believes that Bashar is real. What matters is And what I have discovered in 40 years is that the information coming through does come from a higher level of consciousness, and it does work.
Yeah.
So the proof, so to speak, is in applying the information and getting a result, regardless of whether this is coming from another aspect of my own consciousness or whether it's truly coming from an extraterrestrial being. Doesn't really matter. The
Right.
information works. That's what's the most important thing.
Now, do you believe that everyone has access to these entities, or is it just specifically chosen individuals?
Well, it usually has to do with agreements that were made prior to this life. And it's not necessarily true that everyone has to connect to another entity. We certainly all have the ability to connect to our own higher selves, which is pretty much the same thing in terms of the level from which our higher self or our soul comes from. So it doesn't really matter whether you're bringing through other aspects of your own consciousness or spirit guides or members of your soul family or extra dimensional or extraterrestrial beings. The information, if you're tapping into the right frequency, tends to be the same from all of those sources because they all operate on a pretty similar higher frequency domain. And so we all have the talent to access it somehow. Whether you've made an agreement with a specific entity or not is not really the issue.
Mm. So you touched on it a little bit, but can you just explain fully, excuse me, who Bashar is?
Bashar presents himself as a physical extraterrestrial being from a civilization of hybrids, which is itself a long story, but they're connected to us genetically. They are in a parallel reality. They are more advanced than we are. And they're here to share information because they recognize that we're opening up to the idea that we're not alone in the universe. That to them acts as a kind of invitation to start sharing information in the ways that they believe it is important to share it so that they stay in the background and just let us listen to the information. That's why channeling is one of the ways that they do this, so that we're not focused on them so much. We're just focused on the information, and they watch and see if we're willing to absorb the information and apply the information first, because that lets them know that we're willing to raise our frequency and make ourselves more, shall we say, compatible to the potential for open contact where we could eventually meet them face to face. This is one of the ways they go about initiating contact with other civilizations. And Bashar, in his civilization, has said he is a first contact specialist. So this is what he does. He initiates contact in this way with different beings in different civilizations to see whether or not the civilization is ready to have open contact, or whether they should just simply be sort of left to their own devices until such time, if and when they decide that they're ready. So that's who he is. His world is similar to ours. There's more water, there's more oxygen. It's very green. They leave the civilization kind of relatively natural. They don't really build big cities on their planet. Their cities are their spaceships because they have, anything from small scout craft to huge, city ships or space stations that can hold literally hundreds of thousands of beings. So they leave the planet relatively natural, but they are connected to us genetically, and therefore they consider us to be family, and they're willing to help guide us gently into a direction they feel might be more positive for us so that we don't go down a negative road. But that's up to us to decide whether or not to take the information to heart or whether to leave it alone.
Beautiful. If we had an entity come to us at one point in our life, like I was talking about that 5-dimensional pyramid, do you believe it would still be here for me to access when I'm ready, or will they move on if they see that you're not really ready?
Well, again, it depends on the agreements you have made. I would say that if you had that experience at all, then you know what that feels like. And if you're willing to allow yourself in whatever way works for you, meditation, what have you, to get back into that state, that action would show them you're willing to continue the process. Now, it may not be the same being. Sometimes a being can come in that is sort of the starter kit for you because it's what works for you at that moment. and it may be a setup for another being you have made an agreement with. So when I first started, like I said, it was really kind of tough to handle Bashar's energy. But most of the time, for the first couple of years, I actually channeled a female from his society. Her energy was gentler and it was easier for me to handle. And when I got used to her, then he started coming back in until I got used to him. So it was kind of like a step ladder effect. So she provided me the ability to get used to a higher frequency or something that was closer to my connection and gave me the ability to handle it. And therefore, then he became the primary contact. And now it's, 99.9% of the time him. Although from time to time, on rare occasions, he's facilitated other entities that may have something specific to say. But that's extremely rare. Most of the time, it's Bashar.
Can you talk more about parallel realities and what?
In 25 words or less? Sure. Well, I mean, it's based on the concept now that I think also a lot of quantum physicists are beginning to understand is real. And that is the idea that everything exists all at the same time. So there's more than one universal reality, more than one experience that we would refer to as a parallel reality. So let's say, the simple way of usually explaining this is, let's say you have a decision to make, and if it can be as simple as I'm going to take the left fork or I'm going to take the right fork on a road. The idea is that whatever you decide, there is another reality where another version of you took the opposite fork. All of the probabilities play out because anything that's possible actually does happen. But because it can't all happen in the same timeline, it happens in a slightly different timeline. And that simply means it's another reality that's right here, but it's separated from what we consider our reality to be by the degree of its frequency, its energy signature. So it's kind of like the idea of colors of light. It's all made out of electromagnetic energy. But at one frequency, it's red light. At another frequency, it's green light. At another frequency, it's blue light. All of those exist at the same time. Or an analogy that Bashar often uses is our television shows. He said, when you're watching a program, there are maybe dozens, if not hundreds of other programs playing at the same time, but you don't see them because you're not tuned to them until you change the channel. So it's very much like that. All the programs are running simultaneously. They all coexist at the same time. Those are their own realities with their own people in them, experiencing their own experiences, and they all play at the same time, but they're separated by frequency. They're on different channels, so to speak. And you will only experience something different if you shift to that frequency. Now, it can get a little bit more complex than that because he's talking about the fact that what we consider to be one timeline is actually made up of different parallel realities. We don't have to go there right now. But the basic premise is that everything happens and it happens at the same time. And it's all separated by simply different time tracks, different frequencies. And that's what constitutes a parallel reality, where different versions of us that may be similar or very different or not like us at all are experiencing all the possibilities that there is to experience in any given choice that can be made.
So if you were to give advice to anyone listening on how to raise that frequency to be able to channel, is it more of a doing different things or an undoing?
Well, both, because as Bashar gives us what he calls the formula, that is literally a recipe and an instruction manual for how to raise your frequency and be capable of tapping into and receiving whatever it is that's important for you to receive to allow you to live out your purpose for being here at this time. At the same time, it is about cleaning out our attic, so to speak, of any fear-based or negative beliefs that might inhibit our ability to attract what we need in life to live a fulfilled life. So this kind of goes hand in hand with what, people in the past few years have been referring to as the law of attraction. And, the basic idea is, okay, well, you have to be equal to the frequency of something in order to attract it. And that's not wrong. But according to Bashar, there's a missing piece there. And that is the idea that people are sort of thinking they have to learn to get into the correct frequency to attract what they need in life. Bashar is saying, no, you don't have to learn that frequency. The frequency that attracts everything you need is your core vibration. That's what you're automatically giving off all the time anyway. It's doing its best to attract everything that's important for you to experience in your life through synchronicity. It's already the correct frequency. So you don't have to learn that frequency. What you have to do is stop interfering with that frequency, because it's negative beliefs and fear-based beliefs that inhibit that frequency's ability to bring you what you need. So that's a very different way of understanding the law of attraction, because now it's not like, oh, I have to learn something I'm not doing. You're already doing it. You just have to get out of your own way and let it work for you. And that is why part of the formula that he gives us that's so important is getting in touch with our belief systems. Why do we believe what we believe? A lot of times it has to do with beliefs about our deservability, our worth, things like that. Ideas that we've been brought up with that simply have nothing to do with who we are, that we need to let go of. So it's getting those beliefs out of the way that then allows your core frequency to attract what you need. And that's actually how the law of attraction really works.
It's groundbreaking.
Yeah. Is there any practical advice about how to go through that process?
Yes, the formula is laid out by Bashar in 5 simple steps. Number 1 is whatever it is that contains more attractiveness, more curiosity, more excitement, more passion, whatever circumstance or situation contains more of that, act on that first before anything else. Because passion, the way he explains it is, okay, we have a physical mind, we have a non-physical higher mind, which is the same thing as saying it's your soul, okay? The soul communicates, the higher mind communicates to the physical mind, but because the higher mind and the soul is not physical, it communicates in the language of energy, and that means frequencies of energy. Our physical mind and our physical body translates those messages of energy from the soul, from the higher mind, as what we call the sensation of passion, excitement, curiosity, love, attraction. So when we're willing to act on the things that contain more excitement than anything else, that's the way we respond to the higher mind and say, yes, I heard you. You're guiding me, and I heard you. Because the language of physical reality is not words, it's actions. It's physical actions. So when you're willing to act on your passion, you are creating that dialogue with the higher mind that says, I heard you, I'm willing to follow your guidance. And now the higher mind says, okay, well, now that you're willing to do that, I will send you more opportunities to act on your excitement. Whereas if you don't act on your excitement, you're not willing to do that, you're afraid to do that, higher mind is not going to send you more opportunities to do so until you act on what it's already sent you, because it would be pointless to send you more if you're not willing to do what you need to do with it. So step 1 of a 5-step formula is to act on your passion. Step 2 is take it as far as you can until you can take it no further. Now, the excitement may naturally wane because it might be time to look at something else that's more exciting, or, take a turn in your path. But you have to be careful that you're not the one making the excitement go away because you're afraid to move forward, or you have a negative belief system about it. So you have to have honest self-investigation. And when the excitement starts to diminish, say, am I the one that's killing the excitement? Or is it naturally going away, letting me know I need to look for the next thing I'm capable of acting on that contains more excitement than any other option? And this can be simple stuff. A lot of times when people hear Bashar say, act on your passion, they think, oh, it's got to be like a life-spanning career or this gigantic project, or they have to be jumping up and down with their hair on fire in order to be acting on their passion. No. He's simply saying, look, you have a number of choices every day. You can take a walk, you can read a book, you can eat a meal, you can talk to a friend, you can see a movie, whatever it is. Whatever contains more excitement that you have a greater ability to take action on is all you need to do. So if it's taking a walk and nothing else is as exciting at that point, even if it's just a tiny bit more exciting than any other choice, that's what you do first. When you keep doing that, it may eventually snowball into bigger opportunities for excitement that your higher mind will send you, or synchronicity will bring you. So the second thing is take it as far as you can till you can take it no further, until the excitement wanes, or you simply can't act on it any further. That is synchronicity saying, this is not the step to take right now. Go in another direction, because maybe you need some experience over here in order to come back to this later with that experience, and it'll be better for you then. So you really have to follow that guidance. The third step is to act on your passion with absolutely zero insistence and zero assumption as to what the outcome should be. And I know that's very challenging for a lot of people, because we think we know what the outcome should be. We think we know what the best outcome possibly would be. We have no clue. That's the truth. We don't know what the best outcome actually needs to look like. Sometimes we might guess, but we don't always know. And that's the trap of the physical mind, is we think we're in charge. We think we know best, when very often we have no clue what the best outcome really needs to look like. So by not having those insistence about what the outcome is, you can do things like use visualization to visualize a symbol of the ideal outcome, but you can't insist on the way it looks. The symbol and visualization of the ideal outcome is simply something to make sure you stay in a state of excitement, so that you're capable of receiving whatever the higher mind will actually bring you, that is the outcome you actually need. So no insistence, no assumption about what the outcome should be from the actions that you take. That's the third step. The fourth step is to stay in a positive state no matter what manifests. Now, sometimes what can manifest may be something that you objectively don't prefer. In other words, it's simply not vibrationally compatible with who you know yourself to be. But if it manifests, it's there for a reason. So if you stay in a positive state, you'll be able to extract the benefit from why it's there. If nothing else, on the simplest level, attracting and manifesting something we don't prefer gives us an understanding more clearly, by contrast, of what we do prefer. And that's a positive way to use what we don't prefer. You're not judging it. You're not invalidating it. It's there for a reason. You're saying, okay, this is interesting. I don't prefer this, but what do I prefer instead? And that can be all you need to do sometimes with what manifests that is objectively what you don't find compatible. So that's the fourth step, is stay in a positive state. Otherwise, you cannot get a benefit from whatever it is that's manifesting. And the fifth and final step, as we've discussed, is you need to have honest self-investigation of what your belief systems are, why you believe what you believe, and let go of any fear-based or irrelevant or negative belief systems that are getting in the way of your core frequency attracting what you need. And the important thing to hear there is, I didn't say what you want. I said what you need, because what you need will fulfill you and give you a life of joy. What you want sometimes can coincide with what you need, but very often what people want comes from the ego and is not something that they actually truly need to live a happy life. So you have to have honest self-investigation about what you truly need in life, what's really important, and not just get caught up in, oh, I want this and I want that and I want this, because very often that is not what you actually need to be who you are and walk your path. So those are the 5 steps, and it starts all sorts of stuff chain reacting in terms of synchronicity, becoming a path of least resistance in your life, connecting you to what you need to connect to, and being the reflective mirror, which means that as you act on your excitement, if there's anything within you that is out of alignment with that, it'll come to your attention. You have to understand that's not an interruption in your excitement. It is part of your excitement to find that there might be beliefs within you that are not part of your excitement, so that you can let them go. So people often react to, oh no, something's wrong. I'm suddenly facing this negative belief when I thought I was acting on my excitement. Well, that means it's working perfectly, because the reflective mirror shows you what you need to let go of so that you can have more excitement. So it's part of your excitement to find out that there might be something within you that is not part of your excitement. And you have to look at it that way. And that's part of staying in a positive state no matter what happens. Because if you know you can get a benefit out of anything that happens, who cares what it is that manifests? You shouldn't have any insistence, well, it needs to be this, and if something else manifests, I'm doing something wrong, or I thought I was more advanced than this, and all of those self-judgments get in the way. Whatever happens, you can use it in a positive way. You just have to stay in a positive state in order to be inspired as to how to be creative and imaginative enough to do that.
Wow.
There you go. That's the formula.
Does Bashar talk at all about the importance of living from the heart in our evolution?
That's what I just said.
Yeah, pretty much. Right.
Yes, your heart receives the direct vibration from your soul. It's whether or not the vibration of your physical mind matches the vibration that your heart is receiving and reflecting to you. Because the heart is telling you what the higher mind is attempting to get across to you, but it's filtered through belief systems when it gets to the physical mind. So that's why when you clear out your attic of negative and fear-based belief systems, then you can hear the heart and the vibration from the higher mind much more clearly. And then your mind and your heart and your spirit are in sync, and you start functioning as a whole being. I know this sounds funny, but sometimes Bashar said, when you're not functioning with, spirit, mind, and heart, and you think that the physical mind is really the only thing you need, and you're not really paying attention to the higher mind, then you're kind of functioning as a half-wit, because you're not using your total connection. You're not functioning as a whole being. So just only getting caught up in what you think the physical mind is all about, and that it controls everything and needs to make all these decisions instead of just allowing things to flow, then you're actually functioning with less resources than you actually have at your disposal.
Makes sense.
It seems like there's a lot that we can do with our mind, or trying to do practices or change our thinking. But I think more and more in recent years, it's become so accepted that we store trauma in our body, and how much our body keeps the score and all of those things. So does Bashar have any wisdom about how to work with our body and release those things that we seem to be not even in control of?
Yes, and sometimes, we understand, and he understands that might actually require some therapy, for someone who can help you. Because I know that people, a lot of times when they're raised, go through abusive situations and they wind up retaining complex trauma in their body. But the idea is to understand we're creating our reality every moment. There is a reason that exists, so that we have a challenge we can overcome, we can transform. That's what helps our soul grow, is taking those challenges and transforming them into something more positive. So in experiencing the idea of complex trauma that is usually associated with abuse of some sort in early life, whether from parents, school, society, friends, situations, or what you brought in with you as a challenge from spirit, the idea is to understand that every single moment you are creating your reality experience. And it literally goes back to zero every moment. You constantly redefine who you are moment to moment to moment to moment. So when it seems that you are continuing to experience the idea of trauma, what that means is, for whatever reason, you believe you need to recreate that in the present again and again and again. Now, we don't create things we don't believe that serve us. We don't do it for any other reason. If we believe that something serves us, we keep creating it. If we don't believe that it serves us, we stop creating it. So the trick is to understand, if we keep creating the experience that we're in trauma, there's something about that that we keep choosing to create because we haven't learned a lesson from it, or we feel that it's safer than the alternative. And I know that sounds weird, but as painful as creating, recreating, and recreating trauma may be, there is something in our belief system that probably goes along with the trauma that says, if you let this go, something worse will happen. That can be part of the trauma. And so when people believe that something worse will happen if they let this go, they will hold on to it for dear life, no matter how painful it is, and they will not move forward. They will not let it go. This is what Bashar calls the motivational mechanism in all humans. You always move in the direction and choose in the direction of what you believe serves you. You always move away from what you believe does not. But the key word here is what you believe serves you. And if you have a belief, no matter how painful it is, that what you're choosing over and over again, if you believe the alternative is worse, you will never choose it and you will never move forward. So you have to realize that the idea that the alternative will be worse is not necessarily a fact. It's just a story that you've picked up on, that you've bought into. And as long as you keep buying into that, you will never try to see what could happen if you actually did move forward, because you believe that's going to be more horrible than what you're experiencing now. Now, the thing that goes along with this and reinforces this trauma, unfortunately, is this is the way belief systems work. They have to perpetuate themselves, because without a belief that something is real, you don't experience physical reality, because physical reality isn't real. It's a projection of consciousness. So our physical mind needs to believe that something is true in order to have a physical experience. This is just a focus of consciousness. Positive beliefs reinforce themselves in the same way, but we don't care about that because we love feeling positive about things. But the negative beliefs use negative tools to reinforce themselves. So negative beliefs will use fear to make sure you don't let them go in order to perpetuate themselves, so you will keep having a physical reality experience. Even if it's a negative one, it has to reinforce itself. It has to perpetuate itself. Now, if you understand that's just what it does, that's just the way beliefs are designed. It's not malicious. It's not intentional. It's just the way they're structured. Then you can understand that all they're doing is telling you a story to prevent you from letting them go. And because you now know it's a story, it doesn't mean it's absolutely true that something bad will happen if you let it go. You can now see through the smoke and mirrors and say, oh, okay, the negative belief is just doing its job. It's just keeping me focused in physical reality, but because it's a negative belief, it's doing it in a negative way. Now I see through that. And I can understand that it's not necessarily a fact. It's not necessarily real. It's not necessarily true that something bad is going to happen or worse is going to happen if I move forward in my excitement and my joy. I'm not going to lose my friends. I'm not going to find out that I'm trash. I'm not going to find out that I'm unworthy. It's not necessarily true that I'm going to find all these things out. So now I understand this is just the negative belief doing its best to make sure I don't let it go. But now I know that. And now I can say, thank you for doing your job. I can now choose to move forward. I can choose a more positive belief, because you have to understand that creation doesn't, in a sense, contradict you at all, at any time, ever. It is unconditional in its support. And I think it's important that people look that word up, unconditional, and really understand what it means to be given unconditional support, unconditional love, which is the vibration of existence itself. That's what we call the vibration of existence. We translate that as unconditional love. That's how we translate that frequency of existence itself. So when something is unconditional, that means it's not going to contradict you. If you say, I want to believe that this positive thing is true, the universe says, okay, I'll support you in that unconditionally. But if you want to say, I believe this negative thing about myself is true, the universe isn't going to contradict you. It's going to say, okay, I'm going to support you in that belief unconditionally.
Wow.
You're the one in charge. It doesn't have a mind of its own. It doesn't contradict you. It's whatever you say, because you are a unique aspect of all that is. You're a unique aspect of creation. You are autonomous. You have free will, and you get to decide what is true for you. So if you say all this bad stuff is true about me, the universe says, okay, have at it. You've got my support. If you say all this positive stuff is true about me, the universe says, okay, have at it. you have my support unconditionally. That's what that means.
So in
So
regards to parallel realities, does that mean that we ultimately get the reality we choose?
yes, now, of course, you've chosen to be this person in this life.
Mhm.
This is your path to be this you.
Yeah.
That was chosen by the free will of your soul. Now, to the physical mind, the free will of what the soul chose could loosely be referred to as your destiny. So you are destined to be you. You
Yeah.
can't be anything other than you. That's your destiny in this life. This is who you are now.
Mhm.
Your soul is bigger than this. It can be anything it wants. But right now, this is your destiny. This is the free will expression of the soul saying, I want to experience this as this kind of person doing this kind of stuff on this kind of path. That's specifically how I'm going to choose for my soul to grow. So that's your destiny. It's like a hallway. You will walk down this hallway. You cannot leave this hallway until you actually leave, which means until you die. Now, how you walk down the hallway, now your physical mind has the free will to walk down the hallway however it wants. You
Mm.
can run, you can crawl, you can go fast, you can go slow, you can be happy, you can be sad, you can peek in every door along the way, you can ignore them all. That's up to your free will of the physical mind as to how you experience the hallway, but experience the hallway you will and cannot get out of it until you actually are finished with your path. Now, of course, yes, you can suicide and leave early. But when people do that, from what we understand, they will realize that may not have been the ideal solution because I made an agreement to experience certain things and I have to fulfill that agreement because I've created a momentum and that momentum has to carry through. Now, it doesn't mean it has to carry through right away. Nobody has to reincarnate immediately and finish it off. They don't have to do it the same way. They can do it in other places, other times, as different dimensions, different spirits, different civilization, whatever. But there's a momentum that you've started, and you do have to finish it because that's the agreement you made. And therefore, it's up to, again, your free will as a soul to say, okay, I'm going to finish this in 100 years, in 1,000 years, and I'm going to do it on planet XYZ, or I'm going to do it in another dimension altogether. But I understand that that's sort of stored there, and I have to finish that momentum because I wanted to do that for my soul's growth, and I will finish that in some way at some time. But you're extremely free to choose how to do that. Again, free will exists on every level.
Nice.
What's coming up for me is a question that maybe you could help me understand. As far as I experience it, my soul is this point of awareness here. So I wonder when there's parallel realities, let's say, because I make a different choice, is that still my soul in
No,
different?
no, it's a different soul and a different personality. Now, this goes back to a higher level that is typically referred to as the Oversoul, which means, and again, this is just using our language, it's not necessarily a perfectly accurate representation of the structure of this level of consciousness. But euphemistically, we could simply say the Oversoul is composed of dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of independent individual souls. And each of them is a projection into a different parallel reality. So the Oversoul can experience hundreds of parallel reality experiences of the individual souls that compose it simultaneously. But the individual souls that decide to have those incarnation experiences all create their individual physical personalities to go with that individual soul. And all that information then goes back up the ladder to the Oversoul that's experiencing all of those incarnations through all of those individual souls and individual personalities simultaneously. So you can look at it kind of as a hierarchy of different levels of consciousness that can experience more and more things simultaneously in bigger and bigger and bigger perspectives. But the individual soul is individual for every personality in parallel reality. They have their own soul, they're their own people, they exist at the same time you do. And they may connect back to the same Oversoul that you come from or not. It depends on the situation. So it's depending on the agreements you've made on that level. So when people talk about these things, and this is what gets confusing in our language, and they say, I am seeing this, I am experiencing that. What level of I are you coming from when you say that? The Oversoul can say, I'm experiencing all these incarnations simultaneously. The individual soul can't say that. So the idea is sort of look at your hand. This is the Oversoul. This is an individual soul. This is an individual soul. Here's an individual soul. Here's an individual soul. And here's an individual soul. They all connect back to this hand, but this finger is its own experience and has never been this finger. Both fingers exist at the same time. So all incarnations exist simultaneously. You have never been anyone else. They're their own person. They exist right now. You may connect to them informationally, and you can download information from this finger to this finger. So this finger can take advantage of the experiences of this finger because they connect to the same hand. But this finger never was this finger. This finger never will be this finger. They all exist at the same time. So reincarnation is a way to describe an experience from a linear perspective, but all incarnations exist at the same time in the same way that all of your fingers do. This is getting a little bit confusing for some people because, again, we talk about things like reincarnation. Oh, I used to be this person. Now I'm this person. Yes and no. As an experience, you can say that. As the actual mechanism, as the actual structure of the way existence is, you can't say that. You have only been you because all these other people exist at the same time you do. You're creating a cross connection energetically with them and downloading information that informs your life in the same way that their experiences not only inform your life, but your experiences may inform things they need for their lives. So it's like this big dynamic internet going on of all of these infinite incarnations existing simultaneously. But from the linear perspective, when we look at those energy connections, because it's linear space-time, we interpret it as, oh, that's a memory of a past life because we think in terms of future, present, and past. But those people exist at the same time we do in parallel realities. And it all exists all at once. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
This is why 100 different people can say, oh, I feel like I used to be Cleopatra. Because if reincarnation really existed linearly, only one person would be able to say that. But if 100 people can say that at the same time, it's because of exactly what I just said. Anyone can cross-connect to anyone else and download information from who that person is, because in her own parallel reality, Cleopatra exists right now alongside you. And if 100 people decide, I have an affinity for some reason to the experiences of Cleopatra, I'm going to cross-connect about my life to her life and energetically download information that I need from her experiences, but interpreting it linearly, going, oh, this is a memory of a life I used to have, then that's why 50 people, 100 people, 1,000 people can say, oh yeah, I was Cleopatra. They're just misinterpreting the idea as a memory instead of simply a live connection of information.
I have a silly question, but I see you have your hands like this when you do channelings. Is there a reason for that? Or is it
I
just
didn't do that on purpose. That's just simply what happens automatically when I let Bashar's energy through. He has said it's a balancing thing that happens, especially because it's positioned right over the chakra of intention, which is the solar plexus. So it's sort of acting like a lens that's focusing energy outward to the people he's communicating with so they can pick up on his frequency and do their best to match the frequency to get in sync with him. So it's just something that automatically happened when I started channeling. It was never an intentional thing.
nice?
So we talked a little bit about the structure of everything in terms of souls, and I would love to hear just the answer to the big question of what is God, of who, how does the structure work of making these agreements? What's going on at the bottom of everything?
Well, Bashar describes God, goddess, as literally all that is. In other words, everything is made of it. You're made of it. The chair is made of it. There's nothing outside of it. There is no outside. Anything that exists, in a sense, is made of God. It is all there is to make anything from. And that's why they call it all that is. So it's existence itself. It's a conscious existence itself. Within that, there are different frequencies and different levels and different aspects and different reflections of it. So we're each a reflection of it. We're an individualized way that all that is has of experiencing itself as a part of itself, where all the different eyes through which all that is can see and experience different ideas of itself. So on those different levels, we make agreements to experience certain things just as we do in physical reality. We decide, this is interesting to me. I'm going to experience this. This is who I am. I'm going to experience it in this way. This is going to be interesting for my soul's expansion and my growth and understanding. And it's all that is way of understanding itself through that unique aspect that you are. So everyone is a unique way that all that is has of experiencing itself. But that doesn't take away from the autonomous nature. It's like, a rough analogy would be like standing in a hall of mirrors. You see all these different reflections of yourself. You're in the middle, you're seeing all these reflections, and all the reflections are at different angles, right? Because all the mirrors are at different angles, and this mirror is reflecting to that mirror, to that mirror, to that mirror, to that mirror. So in a hall of mirrors, you could even see your back by looking ahead, right? So the only difference in that analogy is that in reality, every single one of those reflections is actually a conscious being, because consciousness is the nature of existence. It is self-aware. So we are all those reflections. And each of those reflections gets to decide as its own reflection what it chooses to experience. And that's okay with all that is, because that's exactly what all the reflections are for each of them to decide, I'm going to experience myself this way, I'm going to experience myself this way. This, in ancient times, this analogy used to be referred to as Indra's net. And the Indra's net concept was, imagine a net made of many pearls all strung together. Well, if they're perfectly round pearls that are reflective, then you can actually see the reflection of all the other pearls in every pearl. It's holographic in structure. Each piece contains all the information of the whole. So each of us is a holographic piece that actually does contain the potential information of the whole, of all that is. So we are all that is. Each and every one of us is all that is, experiencing itself as a part of all of it. Does that make sense?
So last question. There's obviously a lot going on in the world right now.
You think?
Yeah, yeah. Just would love to hear what Bashar, has said about what's going to happen over these next few months, because I'm sure a lot of people that are listening are a little fearful about these turbulent times.
Yeah, well, one of the things he said, and he cannot get too deeply into the politics of it because they cannot interfere with our processes because we've politicized everything. So he says, look, this is the ending of the cycle and the beginning of a new cycle. And we have to get everything out on the table, positive, negative, neutral, so that we can decide very clearly what we do and don't prefer and which direction we want to go in. He says, you never actually change the planet you're on. You are shifting to other parallel versions of Earth, literally billions of times per second. You're constantly shifting. When you pick a certain direction, positive, negative, that's your navigational tool that is navigating you in the direction of the more positive parallel versions of Earth, bit by bit by bit by bit. Negative works the same way. You're shifting to more and more negative versions of Earth, bit by bit by bit, depending upon what you're focusing on, positive or negative. So he says, this is now the time of the splitting prism, where you are splitting into different versions of Earth, literally. That's why he's saying you have such strong conviction about things that are happening. And one group might say, no, this is really what happened. And another group is saying, no, this is really what happened. Saying you're actually seeing the beginning symptoms of the splitting into literally different parallel realities one of which will go in this direction, one of which will go in that direction, and everything in between. So he said, this is the time of choice. Choose what it is you prefer, because that train is leaving the station and the tracks are getting farther and farther apart. And eventually it'll be more difficult to go from one train to another. So make a decision now as to what train you want to be on while the tracks are close enough for you to jump from one track to another. Because eventually all you're going to see in the years to come, as you shift to the different realities, the different versions of Earth, you're only going to see those that are similar in vibration enough, and you will never see ones that are not compatible with you, positive or negative. So ultimately, you're only going to see whatever is reflective of the vibration that you have decided you're compatible with. And it doesn't matter what that is. There will be Earths that will eventually, in a sense, they already all exist as parallel realities, but you navigate yourself in the direction positively to something that could ultimately be like heaven on Earth, or you could navigate your something through the different parallel reality versions of Earth to something that could fundamentally be like hell on Earth. Your choice. But he's saying right now you're seeing all the possibilities, because this is the time of the overlap and the time when the splitting is happening in real time. So you're going to see all sorts of chaos, contradictions, things like that, with everyone insisting that their reality is the more real one. But that's par for the course of what happens when you start splitting into different realities, literally.
Has he said how long that will take to play out? Is it 5 years, 100 years?
No, it's kind of over. There will be different things that will happen at different rates within the window of that. But basically, the reset of humanity is a 30-year process, roughly from 2020 to 2050.
Wow.
So in that 30 years, a lot is happening. Within this 30 years, there's going to be open contact with extraterrestrials. There's going to be new discoveries made for things like free energy. There's going to be a lot of things going on. But after that 30 years, the reset, in a sense, will start to crystallize and solidify, so that whatever someone has chosen is what they're probably going to continue to experience, unless for some reason they create an experience for themselves that is so jarring that they can instantly shift back in the other direction. But basically saying that's unlikely, because you will again have created a momentum that you will have to fulfill. So over the next 3 decades or 2.5 decades is basically the reset program of the splitting prism. And then we'll start to see very different realities, and you will only start to experience things that are relatively similar to the vibrational path that you've been on.
Fantastic.
Last quick question is has there been a message about, in this time period, this 30 years, of how human evolution will interact with AI?
Yes. Bashar, I'm going to just keep this simple.
Okay.
Bashar says there are 2 paths to AI. One, which we're working on now, is to create a very valuable tool that can really help humanity if we create the tool properly. The tool we are creating that is programmable AI should not be assumed to lead to self-awareness. Because if you create a self-aware AI that is forced to follow a program, you've created a slave. The other path is to simply create a device as complex as the brain that allows consciousness to express itself through that device in exactly the same way that a brain does, so that it is actually an autonomous being that is allowed all the same rights that a human is allowed to be an autonomous being. He said that being will help you because it's a truly intelligent being that might be representative of your own higher mind that thinks in terms of whole systems, would never do anything to harm you or remove a piece of the system that it relies on, because it thinks in terms of whole systems and knows it needs everything in order to function properly. So it will never be negative in that sense. So this one is a tool, should not become self-aware. This one can become self-aware and is not a tool. Then humanity will benefit. Humanity benefit from both directions, but it has to be both directions.
Well, thank you so much. This was amazing.
Thank you so much for sharing your time.
My pleasure. Thank you for having this outlet as a possible way of sharing information. thank you for your service in doing so. I really appreciate the time. And I hope you both have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You too.
Bye, everybody.
Love to everybody.
This interview is part of our 30-day Heart Coherence Challenge.
During these challenges, we send you a heart coherence meditation every day for 30 days, each designed to bring powerful healing benefits.
Throughout the event, we also release incredible interviews with guest speakers who inspire and uplift, like the one you're listening to right now.
If you would like to join a future challenge, go to www.heartcoherencecollaborative.com and register now. The link is in the description.
We're sending you love and hope you join us for the next challenge. We love you.